Factoring review. We talked a lot about this before. We're going back over it just for a little tiny bit. I want to show you the patterns that we talked about before, formulas, whatever you want to call them. Okay? Just as a reminder. When the directions say factoring, factor, whatever form of the verb you want to use there, what do you do first? The very, very, very first thing you always look for is the greatest common factor. Okay? Greatest common factor is the very first thing. It doesn't matter how many terms there are. There could be 2 terms, there could be 3 terms, there could be 4 terms, there could be 17 terms. Hopefully not, right? Okay? But whatever you're doing, the very first thing you should always look for is the greatest common factor. Okay? Sometimes when you pull the greatest common factor out, that's all you can do, isn't it? Sometimes it opens up different options. Okay? What if there's 2 terms? What's that called, first of all? Binomial. What are some options if I see a binomial? How could I factor them? Kind of depends on the numbers, right? But one option could look like this. What's special about that? It's a difference of 2 squares, right? How do we factor the difference of 2 squares? X plus y, x minus y. That's exactly right. Whatever the square root of x is, it goes at the beginning. Whatever the square root of y is, it goes at the end, and then you have to have opposite signs, right? It could also be something like this, right? X squared plus y squared. How do you factor that? Guys, if you'll remember, please, when I ask a question, I want everybody to have a chance to think before people blurt out the answer. Okay? If I have this, can it be factored? No, so what do we write? Prime. What's another option if it's just a binomial? What about that? X cubed minus y cubed. Well, what do you mean, would it be 3? It would not. That's a good guess, though. That's what a lot of people guess. Just because it's a cube, they think there should be 3 terms, because if in the squared, there's 2 terms, right? Or 2 binomials. But if you'll remember, there's a binomial and a trinomial. What goes in the binomial? X minus y. What goes in the trinomial? Square the first one. Multiply these 2. Square the last one. What's the pattern of the signs? So how did we decide on the first one? Same one in the problem. What's the next sign? Opposite of that one. And what's the last sign? Always plus. Okay? Thank you. So what about this one? Isn't it exactly the same pattern that we just did? It's x and y, and x squared, and xy, and y squared. And isn't it exactly the same pattern of signs? It is, right? I just started with a different sign. The sign in the binomial is the sign in the problem. The next sign is opposite of that. The last sign is always plus. Are there any other options for if it's a binomial? What we're trying to factor is a binomial. Not really, right? Probably it's just a GCF problem. We just need to take out a greatest common factor. Okay? What's next? Oh, trinomials? Okay. So trinomials typically look like ax squared plus bx plus c. Is there an exact pattern I can write down for every single time that it's a trinomial? No, it's not a pattern or a formula. It's a method, right? What's this method called? What do we call it? AC method? Do you remember that? I find AC. And I find B. And I say, what two numbers multiply to be AC and add to be B? Now, even what we do from here differs depending on what? My A value, right? If my A value is 1, I can go straight to my two factors, can't I? The two numbers that I figured out that multiply to be AC and add to be B, I can go straight to my factors. But if A is not 1, I split that middle term into two parts, don't I? You remember this? Is any of this new? No, absolutely not, right? Okay, so that's what I do if it's a trinomial. What's another possibility? Well, we've done 2 and then 3. So what about 4? Do we know a way to factor if there's 4 terms? Okay. Whoops. ax cubed plus bx squared plus cx plus d. So that's 4 terms, right? And we factor by grouping. Is there a nice friendly pattern that I can print out for you like these up here that we could do every single time for grouping? No. It's just that we look at the first 2 terms and factor out what's common. We look at the second 2 terms and we factor out what's common. Between those 2 terms that I get, I factor out what's common again. And what's going to be common is usually what's in the parentheses, right? So when I factor out what's common this time, I have that original parentheses, and then I have like whatever was here and whatever was here, that goes into that, right? Into that second parentheses. I know I'm using a lot of weird symbols like, stars, but there's not really anything I could use for that because it's not exactly the same for every single problem, is it? No? Okay. What do you think? How do you feel about factoring? Confident?